what I'm concerned about is that you're arguing extremes. So I saw something today on the internet, on Twitter, as per usual, which is, what did it say? Dykes love girl dick. And everyone's like, oh my God, this movement is so insane. And I'm like, that particular person is insane, but can we paint the whole of transgender people as what this one person is saying? Like, we argue in extremes, don't we?
Sure. But that person was part of a group of people who regularly turn up at women's rights events and shout abuse at them from the sidelines. If the wider community of trans-identified people don't agree with that argument, they should say so, but they don't, you know? And also that attitude that lesbians are perfectly happy to sleep with fully intact men if they call themselves women is homophobic.
I agree with you. And I saw a transgender woman on YouTube who was saying, this was a couple of years ago now, she was saying lesbians who don't like girl dick or sleep with transgender women they're sort of fetishizing. What was it? She was
I know these arguments.
If you're a lesbian and you don't date trans women, you're fetishizing female genitals. And I'm like, what the heck? And I just got really angry. But now, I've taken some time to sort of look at everyone's perspective and realized most transgender women aren't actually trying to date lesbians.
I don't know. I've seen so many examples of it. One of the reasons I got into trouble was because I joined a lesbian dating app called Her because I wanted to show that men were doing it for real in their droves, and a lot of the men who were doing it, they would, some of them had lipstick on and dressed like women, but others just looked like I look like now. I didn't do anything except tilt my head for the photograph, and it's like these men are invading lesbian only spaces. When I was in Tasmania, I met a young woman who is trying to get lesbian only events. She can't do it. She's banned from having these events. I know another young woman in London, Jenny Watson. She tried to have a speed dating event for lesbians, and they just get disrupted, and people just stand up and start shouting them down, and men are trying to force their way into it. I've never seen the kind of homophobia that's happening now under the umbrella of transgender. And the thing about it is, and the thing I always thought, well, I'll explain this and everyone will understand, or well, I'll point this out and everyone will see I'm not a bigot. But because of this fight, I now know more trans people than the people who are calling me transphobic, I know, but admittedly, most of them are transsexuals. They're not like transgender. Most of them are transsexuals. But still, it's like, surely this was the group that we were always told were the ones that were most vulnerable and most in need of protection. But no, trans rights activists, there's a phrase for transsexuals that a lot of the most virulent trans rights activists use, and it's true scum.
What's that mean?
It means transsexuals who believe that to be trans, you do have to have the surgery and you do have to go through all these processes, They think that they are gatekeeping the trans identity, So I noticed what I saw was some very homophobic attitudes. I noticed that women, whenever they tried to get together to talk about these things, they were shouted down, they were spat at. You saw what happened when Posey Parker came over here last year, what happened in Albert Park in New Zealand, like a 71-year-old woman being punched 3 times in the face by a 20-year-old man. I just couldn't ignore it.
And it is interesting, depending on what media you watch as well. I mean, you seem to have quite a wide scope. There is one point that I want to say before about the woman trying to organize, lesbian-only dating events. I do notice they seem to amplify, this is for biological females only. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if they didn't say that. Would they have transgender women trying to? I just think it's amplifying this culture war by saying biological females only. People do that on their dating profiles as well. I just wouldn't say it, Graham. Obviously, watch what I say here. I obviously only date biological females because I can't help it. That's my attraction. But
they would call you a bigot. They would call you a bigot for
only if I said on my
dating.
They would
call you a genital fetishist for that.
What the extremes would. I don't think many transgender people would.
That's mainstream trans activism. It is mainstream trans activism. It really is. I mean, mainstream trans activism is violently phrased, harasses lesbians. It's not a good movement, you know. And the thing I would say is, if you look and if you pay attention, you can find many trans people who are in absolute despair at what's being done in their name, you know. Like, who's a good example? Miranda Yardley is a friend of mine, who sometimes is known as Tina, which is very funny because he's huge. And Miranda is like, you know, he will go to women's events and stuff, but he'll deliberately dress down because he knows there's a lot of women there who are really angry and upset about what's been happening over the last few years. I mean, it's this simple. Basically, if you can have a lesbian event and no biological men turn up, everything's fine. But if you can't have a lesbian event at all because biological men want to turn up and you're saying no, that's a problem. That's homophobia, you know?
Like I said before, I wouldn't put biological females only on my dating profile, even though it's sort of implied.
But you shouldn't have to. The word woman should mean woman. It should mean woman only. It should mean biological woman.
But you're making it sound like all these transgender people are going to come to these lesbian events and just start taking it over. Like, I think there's like one or two.
That's what's been happening.